be born.
Waking from a deep sleep may not sound like such a bad thing, and years ago it might not have been. But today, in a world reliant on technology for the basics of everyday life, increasing levels of solar activity and the solar flares from the consequent space storm could wreak complete havoc. In a new warning, NASA, who took these pictures, are telling us to prepare for a once-in-a-lifetime storm which could result in widespread blackouts and leave us without critical communication signals for considerable periods of time. The bolt of lightning caused by the superstorm could have disastrous consequences for the world emergency service systems, hospital equipment, and of course would leave us without our computers, sat-navs, iPods, the list goes on. The worst-case scenario would see large parts of the world plunged into darkness for months. Most likely, however, say senior scientists, it will last hours and maybe days. But this, in a world reliant on high-tech systems for almost everything we do, is most likely to have a drastic impact.
Zad had a rude awakening this morning when a heat burst hit their town. Temperatures jumped 20 degrees in a short period of time, and winds hit speeds of more than 75 miles per hour. The burst came without warning, and many residents didn't know what was happening.
There was this loud crash and the house shook, and I thought, oh, the roof's coming off. So I even looked up to see if the roof was still there, and it was. And the house quit shaking. So I thought, well, I was afraid there was a tornado. All I could think about was get my kids down to the basement.
Many residents woke up to find trees crashed onto their homes, even cars. No injuries have been reported.
Everybody, the sun is the source of all life, and it could mean the end of life as we know it. NASA did a study, and its findings are now out. We're not talking about global warming. A brand new government study on the very real destructive threat of solar storms. Check it out. The surface of the sun, a roiling mass of plasma and charged high-energy particles. As we move to the launch pad, we can show exactly what we mean, escaping the surface of the sun and traveling through space to areas down here on Earth. Now, this giant fireball, if that ball hit the Earth and its magnetic shield, it would be devastating. I want to show you New York City at night. Times Square, drove through here at 8 o'clock last night. Streets are empty, but the electric power grid would be wiped out by the current. Lights and computers, transportation, hospitals, all would go down. The study warns it would be a disaster, far worse than anything we have seen before. The menace of these sunstorms poses a bigger threat to more high-tech and advanced countries like the U.S. Everything from our sewage systems to our Wall Street banks operate with our power grid. And a game-changing solar storm that could hit at any time. So how worried should we be? Sounds like we should be. Michio Kaku is an astrophysicist and author of The Physics of the Impossible. Sir, good morning to you. Welcome back here.
Glad to be on your show.
Now, what I'm reading here scares me to death. Should I be that way?
That's right. We're talking about a potential Katrina from outer space. Katrina caused about $100 billion in property damage, and unless we begin to make efforts now to reinforce our satellites and power grid, we could have something maybe 10 times bigger than Katrina, because we're talking about the loss of all electricity and all satellite activity. We'd be thrown 100 years back into the past.
Michio, has this happened before?
In 1859, we had a humongous storm that wiped out telegraph poles, and we tried to then estimate what kind of power could do that. And we now realize that we are very young in the space age. It's something like the 1859 storm hit again. It would literally paralyze all the United States, not just for a day or an hour, but for months to years. Transformers would short circuit and burn out. Satellites would be fried to a crisp. And the sun, however, has these storms every 11 years. Every 11 years, the magnetic field flips. But in 2012, we do expect perhaps another big one.
Well, we have never before in our history, in human history for that matter, relied so much on technology as we do today. And that's part of what they found in the study, because we rely so much on our ability to communicate through our computers that they would all go down, which would handicap not just New York, but really the eastern half of the United States. That's what the study finds, which would be far worse than the blackout of New York from 4 years ago, Michio.
So that's right. Those black dots only last for a few hours to a day. But if you start to short circuit all the transformers and blow out the satellites and fry the communications grid, then you're talking about knocking out the United States for months before we can get enough rescue crews and repairmen to handle not just one city, but hundreds of cities around the United States.
You know, Michio, sometimes you come on here and you sound like the Doctor of Doom and Gloom. Does something like this keep you up at night?
It does.
Resolution video of the oil leak at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to show it to one of the nation's top experts who thinks BP's strategy has made the actual flow of oil, at least right now.
That was 12 to 19,000. That was 20% more. I wouldn't be surprised at all, based on the amount of oil we're seeing in the water, the amount of oil we're seeing in the wetlands, that the flow rate's actually higher. They haven't told me that. Secondly, I think it would be better to bring in outside experts, not only to look at the flow rate, but look at the dispersants they're using, look at the technologies they're using. The more
resumes this morning for the people still missing after a flash flood tore through an Arkansas campground. At least 16 people were killed in this national forest there. Joining us.
In fact, a follow-up segment tonight, as we reported last night, the Justice Department will not prosecute 3 Black Panthers accused of intimidating voters in Philadelphia. One of the men, King Shamir Shabazz, is featured in a National Geographic program.
I hate white people. All of them. Every last iota of a cracker. I hate it. We didn't come out here to play today. There's too much serious business going on in the black community to be out here sliding through South Street with white, dirty, cracker whore on our arm, and we call ourselves black men with African garb on. What the hell is wrong with you, black man? You had a doomsday with a white girl on your damn arm. You want freedom? You're gonna have to kill some crackers. You're gonna have to kill some of their babies.
Again, Mr. Shabazz, one of the Black Panthers who Attorney General Eric Holder would not prosecute.
Of Islam is embedded within the teaching of Islam.
The spirit of hatred and killing and slaughter is the spirit of Islam as it is written in the Quran.
Now I have, in one hand, I have the Quran, in the other hand, I have the AK-47 machine gun. I can change the world.
Islam has a plan to take over the world. They believe very strongly that they are going to create a worldwide ummah, or nation of Islam.
Plainly, the Muslims have a missionary agenda, and governments, Muslim governments like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, are funding the evangelization of the West through videos, through booklets, through leaflets, and through many other programs.
We're seeing Islamic society seeking to impose a 7th century Arab worldview on everybody else.
While they all know life is better in the West, they want to destroy the West.